Welcome on this new episode of Let's Talk AI. Today I'm with Seth Earley. I could define you as CEO of an AI company and author of the AI powered enterprise, but how would Seth Earley define himself?
That's a good question. I guess I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a grandfather. I have three grandchildren. One of them just turned 1 year old. The others are 12 and 13. And my daughter is a Deloitte consultant. So we talk shop, which is kind of fun. But I also am someone who's into fitness. I like to work out. I like to do martial arts. I like to do weightlifting. I mentioned I have shoulder surgery on Monday because I was a little too enthusiastic with some of my training.
Oh,
And recently started Aikido, which is a lot of fun. But I've been doing Shotokan karate for 30, 40 years now. So that's been interesting. I think,
wow.
an entrepreneur, I'm a problem solver. I like to teach. I like to share my knowledge. I like to do interesting, innovative things. I'm very curious. I also have a love for science. My background was chemistry, and I still love to read Science Magazine and Scientific American and have discussions in that space. And I try to be a mentor and a coach in my leadership role at the organization. And I know you described it as an AI business, but it's really an IA business. I like to say we're more about information architecture than artificial intelligence. So everybody kind of positions themselves these days as having some AI secret sauce, or some part of what they're doing is all magical machine learning and all this. And we're like, you know what? First thing about AI is forget AI and look at the business, and then look at the data, look at the content, look at the information that is needed to support whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. And if there is a machine learning algorithm, or if there's an AI program or application that can help with your process, help with some specific intervention, great. But many times it's more about the blocking and tackling of understanding processes,
Mhm.
having good data curation capabilities. And a lot of efforts these days in things like semantic search and knowledge graphs are trying to make up for our past sins in poor data management and poor information management. So part of what we try to do is help organizations clean up their house, their content house, their knowledge, their product information, their customer data, customer information, and then build on that, build capabilities once you have a
Mhm.
solid foundation, right? Many
Mhm.
organizations are trying to bolt on, AI algorithms and machine learning algorithms to solve a problem, but they're not really taking that step back and looking at
Mhm.
their information flows from a holistic perspective, and saying, how do we need to support those information flows? What do we need to reduce the friction in terms of
Yes.
internal information management? So that's a long-winded answer to the things you said. I'm also listed people think of me as a thought leader. I was recently named as one of the top global influencers in AI, which, who knows if I deserve that, but I'll take it. Uh, and then I was named as an influential CEO for 2022. So anyway, like I say, better than being called a bonehead, but I'm not sure I give it that much credence. But anyway, so those are some of the things that define me. Just sharing my knowledge, being innovative, trying to teach the industry, what is real, and separating the noise from the hype, right? And helping
Mhm.
executives have a clearer understanding of what they need to do to leverage these tools and technologies.
And this is perfectly what we're trying to do on this podcast. So that's great. And thanks a lot for coming on this podcast and sharing your experience, whether it's how to raise an AI business and be a CEO and influence people and share your experience while building a family
Mhm.
and being here for your daughter. So maybe I would also like to have some point of view regarding that. Maybe just to get in touch with the subject. So you mentioned that you talk about AI comes, but maybe in a second place, and sometimes we have to take a step back.
Mhm.
Regarding this step back, and AI, so information architecture and artificial intelligence.
Mhm.
I would like to ask you, on your point of view, because you've been in the industry for some time, how have you seen the things evolved in the field for the companies? Can you share a bit about that?
Yeah, well, back in the day when I started this business, it was in the mid '90s. I'm sure that's probably before you were born.
Probably yes.
I we worked in an area that was kind of emerging at that time, which was called groupware and collaboration and knowledge management. And at the time, I worked with Lotus. Lotus, it was a program called Lotus Notes, and people used to say Lotus did poorly what nothing else could do at all. And it was really about knowledge management. It was really about collaboration. It was unstructured information. It was connecting different systems and different networks together and getting Macs and PCs to talk to one another, and really facilitating this whole knowledge worker way of thinking. It was getting away from mainframes to client server to PC, and really what's happened over those years is a huge numbers of changes. I mean, it was back before we really had the much commercial use of the internet, right? Back in the early '90s, people were just trying to figure that out, and organizations were trying to understand, well, what is this web thing doing? And I remember sitting in one meeting with a client who said, our problem is we don't have enough information online. It's like, okay, well, we're not saying that now, right? It's not like we don't have enough information. So we have way too much information. But at the time, people were really starting to digitize things for the first time. They had paper processes. It's hard to imagine back then. I remember coming across, I was moving a number of years ago, and I came across this pile of business cards that were in the back corner of my desk, in a drawer, kind of hidden and forgotten. And I looked at these cards and I said, they look strange to me. I was like, what's wrong with these cards? And then I noticed there was no email addresses. There were no email addresses. There was no
Mm,
website. It was before people had email addresses and websites. And you can't even imagine
wow.
that, right? Everything is so
Nope.
digital. Back in the day when we were looking at at the precursor to what I call our magical devices, right? Our iPhones, our smartphones, and they call them personal digital assistants, PDAs, and the Palm Pilot, and those things were horrible, right? They did not work at all, and or very well at all. But then look at them today. They're just part of our lives. They're so much of our world is just embedded in these mobile devices, and they're an extension of ourselves, and that is really something that has just emerged and become our central focal point in our world, on personal and professional levels. And at the time, way back when, that was just that was just science fiction, right? That was just some imagine one day when, right? And it didn't take very long for that to happen. So the changes have been pretty immense, and an artificial intelligence back then was really kind of going through. It was coming out of the AI winter, right, where people had gotten discouraged with AI and they were not getting value from it. And one of the professors way back when used to say, AI by definition doesn't work. As soon as it works, we call it something else. In other words, word processing was a first incarnation of AI. Well, it was because it took human expertise and judgment and built programming that actually emulated that. But we didn't call it that. We didn't call it AI. We don't call it AI. We call it word processing. We call it word. So all these things that there's so much AI and machine learning that's under the covers. Search has used machine learning for decades, right? And so people don't think of it that way, but increasingly it's under the covers. But what's happened over these years is that we've had greater computing capabilities. The cost of processing and the power of processing has changed and evolved. We're reducing the cost, increasing the speed and the capabilities and the capacity. Data, we have all of this data that's unlimited, really, that has been thrown off by all these programs and devices and applications. And so, with that, with the power of the processing, the cost decline, the increase in data, the improvement in the algorithms, we did kind of come to this new renaissance of AI. And what's interesting is, way back when in the early days of AI, we we had a symbolic approach, right? We did knowledge representation around understanding, unstructured content and understanding, what AI was trying to do was really trying to understand knowledge representation. It was also still dealing with large amounts of structured data, but we were trying to understand and build things like virtual assistants or build artificial intelligence programs that could emulate what humans did. And with that, we used a knowledge representation, knowledge architecture, knowledge engineering. That has kind of, as the statistical approaches have increased and improved and become more prevalent, a lot of the symbolic has kind of been set aside. But you really need both, right? And that's what people are calling hybrid AI these days. It's saying we do need those traditional machine learning statistical approaches, but we also need to tell the system what's important. We need to tell the algorithm the names of our products and our services and our solutions and our people and our customers. And we need to articulate all of that. And that's where knowledge graph technology comes in, right? We start to define those things and we start to build out, that knowledge architecture. So those things go hand in glove. But I think the answer to this is, huge numbers of things have changed, and really this end-to-end digitization of experiences. And we're still looking at that, right? We're still trying to uh, continue to remove manual processes and friction, and we're still trying to continue to digitize our value chains. And much of the time, it's as we improve and get more mature, we find new areas of opportunity, right? And so this cycle has kind of evolved. It's gone faster. The things that were competitive advantages 10 years ago are just cost of doing business today, right? It's just the foundation, right? It's table stakes. So now we have to say, where are we going? Where are organizations going in order to continue to stay ahead or continue to try to differentiate from their competitors? And so this is just an ongoing, arms race, so to speak, to do that.
Awesome. Thanks. Thanks a lot for this answer. So we've understand quite well how it evolved. It is surely we've started from a period where I wasn't born, as you mentioned, and it is very interesting for me to have this data as how it was before and how we're only touching the surface of how AI can remove frictions,
Yes.
as you are saying. Maybe my follow-up question would be regarding your company today,
Reduce
because
friction and also reduce the cognitive load on the human, right? When people talk about
mm,
cognitive AI, it's not because the system thinks, it's because reducing cognitive load. And that's what every application tries to do. That's what everything, any
yes,
usability study, any improvement in navigation, improvement in search, personalization, contextualization,
mhm.
it's always about making it easier for people to solve their problems and accomplish their tasks.
And so could you define maybe a little like uh, like the cognitive load? Can you define what it is for a human?
I'm sorry, say that one more time. Oh, define cognitive load. Sure. Sure.
Yes,
So,
sorry.
so it's basically the amount of work that you need to do to solve a problem or get an answer. So imagine that I said to you, you said, I have a problem with my laptop, and I can't log on. I say, okay, Thomas, here's the manual, right? Figure it out, right? That's a lot of work, right? I have to go through. I have to study the manual. I have to try to understand this stuff. I have to try to find my answer. I have to. It takes a lot of work, right? I don't want that. I want my answer. I don't want to work for that. So,
Yes.
so if I can say, well, look in chapter 4 for your answer. Okay, that's a little better, but I still have to study chapter 4, right? And I
Mm-hmm,
still have
mm-hmm.
to go through that and understand these details and on that. That's mental work. That's mental work. I don't have time for that. I don't have the energy for that. I don't have the appetite for that. I don't want to do that. It's a dot on my day. I just need to solve my problem. I don't need to learn all this stuff. I need to solve my problem. But then I could say, well, here's the answer in chapter 4. Okay, great. So I started with the manual. Then I said, look in this chapter. Then I said, okay, here's the answer in this chapter. But I can go next level. I can say, here's the answer in this chapter based on the equipment that you have, based on your technical background, based on your error codes. Here's that specific answer, that contextualized, personalized answer. So that's what we want. And what that does is if you can give me that without making me go through all of that work of study and research and figuring it out and troubleshooting and all this, that's what I want,
Hmm.
because I don't want
Yeah.
to work for it. And whenever we
Hmm.
have a site that's easier for us to process, like you go to a website and go, wow, this website's great. They really understand. I love the navigation. I love the products, all that. Why do you love that? You love it because it makes it easy for you to see the things that you need to see. It makes it easy for
Hmm.
you to align your mental model, how you think about your problem, how you think about whatever it is you're doing, whatever it is you're trying to accomplish, the products that you like, or the solutions that you like, or the thing that you want. And it's surfacing that. And that's why you like it, because it's easy, right? And if it's
Hmm.
hard and I can't find the answer, I get frustrated and I simply say, you know what, this isn't worth it. Let me go somewhere else, right? Let me go to another website.
Hmm.
So whenever we have that roadblock, whenever we have that increased cognitive load on the human, when it should not be that difficult, or there's another, site or another organization that is not going to put that impediment up, right? It's like water going
Hmm.
downhill. If
Hmm.
it sees an obstacle, it's going to go around it, right? Humans are the same way. If I see an obstacle, I'm going to go around it. I'm going to try to go around it. I'm not going to deal with that, right? So that's
Hmm.
why this whole idea of of cognitive AI is so important, because it's what it's doing is it's saying, I'm going to reduce the amount of work that you, the human, needs to put into this to get to that answer. And if you're a call center rep, you're like, oh, I have a customer on the phone and I'm trying to solve this problem. Well, how do you find that answer? Like, you're doing research. You as a call rep, oh, I have to go to these different systems and tools. Well, make it easier for that call center rep, because then they can solve the problem for the customer, right? So again,
Hmm.
it's all about being able to navigate and negotiate through this information landscape and ecosystem to get to the
Hmm.
stuff that we need, that's important to us, that's going to help us with our goal and solve our problem. And the more work that we have, the more mental work we have to do that, the greater the cognitive load.
All right. Thanks a lot for specifying. This made me thinking regarding what you're trying to achieve today with your company, as you mentioned uh, before. So, could you maybe explain to me and to the one who listens to you what are you trying to achieve with this company?
Sure, sure. So my company is called Earley Information Science, and we've been around since the '90s, as I mentioned, so a very long time. And our tagline is, we make information more usable, more valuable, more findable, or more findable, more usable, more valuable, right? But the idea is to say,
Mhm.
how do you get to that information? And that can be at any level. That can be, you can be a Fortune 500 company, a Fortune 100 company. We work with many. I think we worked with 25% of the Fortune 100 over the years. And it can be any environment. It can be a website. It could be an internal knowledge system. It could be search. It could be the customer experience. But it's really making those information assets more usable, and more findable and more valuable, as I say. And it's really monetizing that. One of the things that we did for a client, which was Applied Materials, and this is in my book, was we helped their field service organization reduce the amount of time it was spending looking for answers. Right? The field service engineers were spending 40% of their time. They were spending 16 hours per week searching for information, and we
Mhm.
reduced that by 50%. We cut it down to 8 hours per week. Well, that ended up saving them about $50 million per year. There's 3,000 field service engineers. So those kinds of savings are very significant and substantial. Another story I like to tell is a company that had a digital transformation initiative going on. They're a multi-billion-dollar firm, and it was a transformation where we were actually doing the data architecture, the content architecture, product information hierarchies, the taxonomies for product data, the categorization, and they had a million product. Oh, they had hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of products and product combinations. So this is not trivial, and we had to get 13 CTOs to agree on a hierarchy, right, or multiple hierarchies, or actually get them to sign a piece of paper saying they agreed. But what it did was it actually made this transformation. It was a $25 million transformation. Made it successful. Made it work. If our piece was not done, we weren't responsible for all of it. Our piece is maybe $3 million, but without that piece, it would have failed. And with that piece, it was a success. And that led to a multi-billion-dollar increase in the market capitalization of that company. If it weren't for the work that we did, they would have failed and they would not have realized
Mm,
that value. So the
mm,
value for these things is enormous. We have another customer who has been, they tell us they save hundreds of millions of dollars per year on, create once, publish everywhere, content operations to say, let's take this content and let's push it out to all of our distribution channels. Let's push it out to our partners. Let's have it in our marketing programs. Let's use it for customer self-service, for a field service, for embedded information in the products themselves. And they save hundreds of millions of dollars per year in content operations by being able to do that. And they also power their virtual assistants. So part of what we do is say, look, you need to look at these things holistically. It is all about reducing that cognitive load. It is all about personalizing that experience, contextualizing that experience, whether it's an employee or a customer, right? An internal customer, an external customer. And the same principles apply. It's understanding that user, it's understanding their journey, and then it's surfacing and anticipating those needs using a knowledge architecture that supports those specific use cases. So the work that we do is really understanding those user journeys, whether it's an employee journey, again, and that's a lot of process analysis, or whether it's a customer journey, and then building out the supporting data architecture that's going to enable that journey to be streamlined, right? And to
mm,
help that customer get to the information they need. So it's improving customer experience, but it's also reducing costs, right? Because if people can
mm,
find the answer, they don't need to call the call center, right? So you're doing call deflection. The whole
mm,
point of, when people call someone, why are they calling the call center? It's because something is broken, right? Something's not working. They can't get something. So if you can make
mm,
that information easier for them to find and to self-service, you're reducing that. You're making it easier on them. They have a better experience. They're less frustrated,
mm,
but then we're also reducing the cost. You improve the customer experience. You're strengthening that relationship, and you're reducing the cost of serving that customer. So that's kind of what we do, and it has lots of different manifestations. It could be semantic search, right? It could be on-site search. It could be e-commerce search. It could be, content management. It could be knowledge management. It could be personalization, right? We're doing a project right now for a company that is trying to understand how to increase their conversions for software subscriptions, right? And so
mm,
part
mm,
of that is building the right data model for the customer, and then understanding what is it that catalyzes that going from a free version of their software, the trial version, to a paid version, right? What enables that? What causes that? And there's
mm,
content that causes that. There's interactions, there's messaging, there's demos, there's free trial. There's all these different things. There's calls from their sales force. And what are the right things? How do you describe that customer and those attributes of that customer to say, ooh, they're ready to buy, right? And how do we understand
mm,
those signals that tell us they're ready to do something? And then what are those things that we need to give them in order to get them to do that, right? So it's
mm,
defining that in terms of that customer journey, it's defining the customer attributes, and that's defining the content that is surfaced to that customer when they're in that buying cycle, right? And what
mm,
is it that actually is going to push them over the edge? Is it this particular case study? It may vary depending upon the industry they're in. Obviously, it'll vary depending upon what role they're in. It'll vary depending upon what problem they're solving. So we need to describe all those things in data terms. We need to describe all those attributes of the customer. We need to describe where they are in their journey. We call those high fidelity journey models, meaning they're not just pictures, they're pictures that also have a data and metadata representation of their intent throughout their journey. So that's what your systems can respond to, right? So
mm,
again, we're trying to understand that journey. We're trying to define the attributes that describe that customer and where they are in that journey. And then we're trying to bring to that customer the things that they need to make that decision and to do that conversion. So all of that is really about, again, streamlining those experiences, getting the right information to people in the context of their problem, right? Understanding what that context is, understanding what their needs are, and then bringing those assets from the organization to bear so that they can make those decisions.
Okay, great. Great insights. It made me think of. I was curious because I might want to ask you about when does at what point do you feel that a company is ready to implement AI? Because what
Yeah.
you've defined right now is like there is no AI if there is no understood data, in a way that, okay, there is this data, we understand it, but maybe we need to create new pipelines that will give us new data that will be more useful to train a model and to answer the specific needs.
Mhm.
And all of this is, there is no rules really, it's just like creativity and thinking out of the box, and then, well, apply statistics and then try to implement new models into models, and see how it develops. So I would like to ask you that, but I'm also super interested in how do you manage this kind of project
Mhm.
as the CEO of the company.
Sure.
And I think I would like to ask this one as the first question. But if you want
Sure.
to reach out to answer a little bit the other two,
Sure.
feel free.
Sure. So let's take this from a perspective of looking at the information problem, right, or the process problem. At the end of the day, AI is not going to take a complete complex process and automate all of it, right? It's not going to replace a human, not at this point, right? But can take it can have specific interventions. So the first thing is understanding, what are the objectives of the organization from a strategic perspective, and what are the obstacles and what are the bottlenecks? Like where are those pain points, right? And again, you can kind of think of this as, well, this is a brand new field, and there's blue oceans out there, and boy, it's not based on what our current state. It's based on some new value proposition or new products, and that's kind of saying, well, let's take this clean sheet approach. Let's not worry about our current processes. You know, to some degree, you have to do that anyway, right? You have to say, what's our ideal state? What's our future state? What based on our, if we could do anything, what could that be, right? What are the possibilities if we had that ideal, customer experience, or that ideal, employee experience? How do we kind of visualize what that future capability could be? And so there's a little bit of clean sheet thinking there. And then you have to compare that to, well, what do you have today? Like, how are you going to get from where you are to this North Star, this future state, this ideal version, or this ideal experience? And then you have to start breaking that down and saying, well, what do we need to do to get there from a data perspective, from a content perspective, from a knowledge perspective? So it's really starting off with, where are we today, right? Where is the organization today? So current state assessments are very, very important to say, what does the world look like for the organization, and how well are they doing things? So do they have a big, huge mess on their hands in terms of product information, for example, right? E-commerce product information is very important. Uh, or is it in decent shape, but we need to do the next iteration? We need to get to the next level. Uh, and so part of this is saying, what's that current state? And then how well are you doing things? Like there's a maturity assessment to say, do you have the foundational capabilities to adequately manage product data, content, the customer experience, the knowledge or processes? Do you have those foundational capabilities, or is it, do you not have any? And again, there are different elements to these. So we could say product information management, or customer data, or customer experience requires that we have some governance process and some change management, right? One of the reasons why we get into so much trouble is because we have kind of the Wild West, right? People make whatever changes they want, different departments go off in different directions. So governance is a very important piece, right? It's boring, right? It's not exciting, it's not a shiny bit, but it's part of that basic blocking and tackling. It's basic discipline of the organization. So you have to say, if you don't have good foundational processes, it's going to be very difficult to do things that are more advanced and more evolved. So the first thing to understand is, where are we today? How well are we doing the job that we're doing? And then what's our competitor landscape look like? Are the competitors offering things that we don't have? Right? Are they doing things that are a threat to us? What are our customers asking for? What do they need? What do they want? Right? Are there new innovative startups that are serving a customer segment that could then become some threat to us? So we have to look at these things and say, what is that? Where are we today? What does that future state look like? And then building out that roadmap to get there usually entails lots of different initiatives, right? It's not a single thing that you do to pull a trigger and build some functionality. It's working along multiple dimensions. Like I say, governance is very important. Foundational architecture, the technology infrastructure, the ability to model these processes, right? Those all require a level of sophistication that if you don't have that, it's going to be very difficult to do something more advanced. We have an orchestration maturity model. That orchestration
Mhm.
maturity model has different elements. It has a lot of pieces to it, but it's based on four other maturity models, right? One in content operations, another in customer data and customer processes, another in product information, another in knowledge, right? So it's knowledge, content, product data, and the customer. Those are our four pillars. And each of those has a maturity model. And then those all get subsumed into an orchestration model because each of those components is necessary to do personalization at scale, right? Which is at the end of the day, getting people the information they need in the context in which we need it is what everybody's trying to do, right? So it almost doesn't matter what your organization is trying to accomplish. Speeding up those information flows, speeding up that information metabolism of the organization is going to improve whatever your results are, right? It's getting people the information, making them allowing them to operate more effectively, more efficiently. It's getting customers the answers they need. It's innovating more quickly. It's getting products to market more quickly. It's responding to customer threats more quickly, market opportunities more quickly. All of those things allow for greater agility, right? In terms of how the organization is evolving and serving their customers and serving their employees. So when we start looking at how we want to manage these projects, we have to start off with what are those capabilities that we have in place today? What are those capabilities that we need down the road? And what are those gaps? And if we have these gaps, we can't ignore them and we can't pretend they're not there. We can't say, oh, assume good data, right? You can't assume that. You have to build that. Many times when we go from pilot to production, one of the problems is that the data, we have the opportunity to cleanse data and to fix it and to architect it and to enrich it in a pilot situation or proof of concept or a sandbox. But we don't have the ability to do that in production. So when we go to production, we don't have that. So now what we're saying is if you have aspirations to do this stuff and you're building these projects, you cannot forget or ignore the foundational stuff. Now, here's the problem. Many organizations don't know that they don't have that foundation. They don't know that. They get told by the IT organization that, oh, yeah, we got this. Or they get told by a vendor, oh, you can just outsource that. Or they get told by, somebody that that's not that important or it's boring or this technology is going to overcome that. So knowing what those real dependencies are and knowing what those gaps are. And many times they're hidden, right? They're not obvious. So organizations get through, e-commerce initiatives, and then all of a sudden they get to the end of it and they go, oh my God, our product data is horrible, or our customer data is horrible, or we don't have the content and the content operations, or we can't support, this new product launch, right? They get to this point where they suddenly just discover these gaps, but those gaps can be identified early on. It's just you have to be able to recognize that and you have to be able to budget for it. And executives they've been burned, right? So they don't want to make these investments sometimes unless they really have strong proof points. So it's a very difficult situation to correctly calibrate the organization's maturity versus where they need to be and what they need to accomplish. And again, building that capability, building that maturity or backfilling that maturity is critical, because if you get to the end of this and you don't have those foundational processes, you're going to fail. I tell the story of a company that was doing personalization, and we built a personalization architecture for them, and it was great, and it got all the metadata models and all of the details and so on. And at the end of the day, when they deployed this, the marketing organization is like, well, wait a minute, how do we personalize for this audience versus this audience? They did not know what truly personalized marketing messaging was. So they had the same messaging going to everybody. So they had this capability, but they didn't know enough about the customer to be able to really personalize that message. Well, what is that telling you? That's an immaturity of a supporting process that's upstream. That's marketing not knowing enough about the customer to provide that personalized result. The technology was there, the capability was there, but they were lacking the maturity and capability in this other area. So that's why when we talk about orchestration, these things are so important because there's so many dependencies. And if you're missing certain pieces and certain components, it's not going to lead to the outcome that you need. So managing these things has to be, with a clear understanding of what those uh, elements are, what those capabilities are, what those foundational pieces, what those dependencies are, right? And again, it's a lot of times, it's not clear. People don't have a sense of, well, how bad is it, right? How bad is our, people are trying to deploy cognitive AI. Well, that depends on knowledge. Well, if you don't have any knowledge architecture and you don't have any knowledge bases, guess what? You can't deploy it, right? Where you have to spend all this time on training the AI because you don't have that content, right? We train them with content, high value content and knowledge and data. So anyway, so building these initiatives requires that we have to have a very solid understanding. We also have to have leadership that has social capital, right? Because people have to trust them. You can't put somebody in charge of these things that no one listens to, right? And many times leaders don't want to risk their social capital on a failure, right? They're like, wait a minute, I don't want to sign on to this because I have a great track record and this looks like it could be risky, or I don't understand this, or this is a moonshot. I can't sign on to it. So sometimes you end up handing it over to people that are willing to take that risk, but maybe don't have the social capital. So there's a lot of ramifications to these types of things.
Hmm. Well, thanks a lot for this very complete answer. There are many points that I would like to ask more questions, but once that came in mind. So I really want also in this podcast to have time to talk to your book. So maybe if you can say if you can share a little bit of the process on your company, because you described all those key points like solving those pain points and understand very well all those factors that are very important to manage this kind of project and being able to coordinate it. At the moment of recruiting in your company,
Mhm.
I feel like this is an interesting topic: the recruiting in the AI field or in the software development field. How do you approach new talents
Mm.
that might want to join your team? How do you face? Maybe you're not doing the interview yourself. Maybe someone is in charge of it. But
Sure.
how do you face this?
Well, that's a great question. One of the things that we want to do is we want to build new capabilities as well, right? So if we want to be able to support certain types of technologies or certain platforms, we need to build those capabilities, or we need to hire, the skills. And the question is, when do you hire those skills, right? Do you hire them before you have the work, or do you hire them after you have the work, right? And sometimes you need those skills to help sell the work, right? Because you need that subject matter expert. So many times we're partnering with companies that may have those talents and that want to bring them to one of our clients. But we're also recruiting for different types of roles that are more in our sweet spot that we want to then extend, right? So it's a matter of saying we need somebody for this particular project with these capabilities, because we're professional services. We can't hire people and put them on the bench. We have to hire them and put them on projects that they can bill. But then, again, it's trying to understand, well, what do we need right now for our customers, but what do we also need in the near term or in the future to support some of the opportunities that we're looking at. So it's not an easy answer, and I think that we do have a director of delivery that does that recruiting, but it is mostly based on what do we have in the pipeline, right? What do we have? What are we selling these days? What are our clients asking us for? And then what do we have in the pipeline? And we're not we don't put machine learning engineers on the ground, in our projects. We are more about, again, doing the analysis, building. We do deployment, but many times it's deploying initiatives and software that has has AI capabilities or machine learning elements, but we're not doing the heavy, deep in the weeds machine learning engineering and data engineering. We're doing the stuff that is more about configuration and about deployment and about you know solving the business problem with tools that are somewhat better understood, rather than building out new language models or building out machine vision or building out those specific algorithms, right? I'm
Mm-hmm.
leaving that work to the big players, right? Because that's what they're doing. So for us, it's
Mm-hmm.
really about finding that match between the talent and, of course, culture is super important, right? We need to make sure that there's good cultural fit, and part of our core values is our honesty and transparency, being better as a team, being passionate about what we do, uh, you know, doing the things we say we're going to do, being committed to the customer, right? Those cultural issues are super important. Those core values are super important. So that's a really important piece to bringing on new talent. But then it's also a matter of finding someone who can do the blocking and tackling, solving the problems that we currently solve, but then building a new capability, right? So maybe you have a skill set that is very aligned with what we're doing today, but then you have some other skills that are aligned with things we want to do, right? Then
Mm-hmm.
that bringing that kind of talent to the table helps to prepare for that new capability, and it helps to sell that to clients as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a really good question, and right now there's a lot of people that are getting laid off by some of the big technology players. So there's more talent in the market, which is
Mm-hmm.
great. But then the economy is slowing, so you can't scoop up all the people you want, because everybody's some of our large clients are cutting back as well, right? So
Mm-hmm.
everybody's kind of seeing that. So it's usually when the economy is good, there's scarce talent. When the economy is not good, there's lots of talent, but you can't always bring them on when you want to, because of the
Mm-hmm.
economy. So, but it's a good question, and it's something that when organizations are looking at this, they have to do similar things, right? They have to say, what are the capabilities we're trying to build, and how can we solve problems today while building those new capabilities for the future, and then bringing in talent that's commensurate with that.
Thanks a lot for sharing all of this. So I would like to ask you about your book. I've read two questions from the book. I remind you, the one listening, the AI powered enterprise. So the first one is, how will the future be different as a result of artificial intelligence?
Mm,
And the second one, what must companies do to stake their claim on
mm,
that
mm,
future? Uh,
mm.
I don't want to do spoilers on your book, and I recommend people to check them out. But maybe can
Oh
you
yeah,
give some insights for one of your
no,
other
absolutely.
questions, or maybe both?
Yeah, and don't worry about the spoilers on the book. There's a lot in that book, so you're not going to give away the ending.
All right. Okay.
You're not going to
Okay.
give away the secret sauce. It's fine. So there's a number of different ways to kind of think about this. I think one uh, way of looking at artificial intelligence is through the cognitive assistants, the chatbots, the virtual assistants, the intelligent virtual, whatever you want to call them, the conversational assistants, I just wrote an article, and there's lots about this topic, and there's lots of different types of AI assistants, right? They're all similar things. They're all trying to reduce that cognitive load on the human. They're all trying to, facilitate access of information, and they're trying to do this in a conversational manner, right? And so when you look at these bots today, they're not very good. They fail pretty great. They don't fail gracefully, right? They fail in a very difficult manner, or they fail in a very blatant manner. And there's not a lot of kind of easy ways of recovering when they do fail. We always need to have the ability to escalate to a human. But again, these things are very brittle today. They're not very well designed. They're not highly capable. But that's going to change. So we know that just like the Palm Pilot and the PDAs of 20 and 30 years ago were not very good, right? They're really good today. They work well. And we know one day that technology will be such that there's a scenario in the book, in the first chapter, a guy named Alan Perkins, who goes about his day with interacting with virtual assistants from the time he wakes up in the morning, scheduling bots checking his portfolio, doing his travel, helping to find new parts. And these are different virtual assistants. They're different cognitive agents. Some of them work for him directly, his personal assistant. Some work for his company. Some work for other companies. Some are concierge virtual assistants, but they are all very conversational. They're all very capable. It's like talking to a human. It's really similar to, asking questions in a very natural way and getting the answers in a very natural way. And it's just like what you see on Star Trek, where they say, "Computer, tell me this," right? That will be our future. We know that. We know that because that is the nature of technology. One day we will be conversing with these things every day, all day. That's just going to be the world, right? That's the nature of the beast. Technology starts off in a very challenging, difficult, brittle, not very helpful way, and then it evolves over years and decades. And so that's going to happen. We know that's going to be the future. The question is, what's standing between us today and tomorrow? And that's data and content and knowledge, right? There's a lot of work that organizations need to do. I mentioned this other company that we worked with that is saving the hundreds of millions of dollars per year in content operations. They're about 5 to 10 years ahead of the market. Well, guess what? They're going to be building their capabilities much, much more quickly. And those are going to be evolving at an increasingly rapid rate. And it's going to be very difficult for companies to catch their competitors to catch up with them because they're going to be so far ahead. And so when you start thinking about what organizations need to do, they need to get their knowledge house in order. They need to be able to get an understanding of, they have to have maturity and knowledge architecture, and maturity and knowledge engineering, and knowledge operations and content operations. All of these things need to be in place in order to have that stake in the future. Because if they don't, they're going to lose out. And the story I've told in the past is a publisher of textbooks in the K through 12 space. They were actually getting beaten to market by a competitor by 6 months. And we were brought in, we talked, the CEO was like, "Why is this happening?" And we found out that a competitor was actually using component content, which is the way we build these things, right? And this is many years ago. So this competitor was very far ahead of the market. They had 1 million objects in their repository, and they were able to, build a textbook rough draft, because you could pull content based on state level standards and grade level and subject and learning objective and student capability and all these different parameters. And you could very quickly assemble a draft, not something that was finished, but something that an editor could work on. That was getting them that 6 month advantage in the marketplace. And the CEO said, "Wait a minute, why don't we have that?" And the executives in this team, his leadership says, "That's the project we've been trying to get funded for the last 3 years. And it keeps getting pushed off, right? It keeps getting postponed." And so the executives, the lead CEO said, "Well, how long is it going to take us to do it now?" And they said, "Well, at least a year, right? Because they're 3 years, and the competitor is moving ahead." Well, guess what? They were not able to catch up. Okay. They lost that market. They lost that market. So for organizations, this will be existential. This is not something that they can push off down the road and kick down the road if they're not building these capabilities today. In fact, Gartner has said that knowledge management for AI is going to be the fastest growing area with the largest spend in the coming years. And I totally believe that. And we're starting to see that kind of uptake and that kind of uh, you know that demand. We're starting to see organizations really start focusing on this. And again, if they're not, they're going to be in for a rude awakening, because when they have competitors that are taking their customers and offering lower prices and being able to provide greater levels of customer support, that's going to be very difficult for them to recover from.
Okay, well, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot so much for all the information that you've shared in the episode. I have my last one question. So before saying it, yeah, I thank you again for your presence on the podcast and for sharing your vision for sharing about your company. I wish I would have had more time to ask you about your family and how you manage, but maybe that's for another episode. Let us know in the comments, or share with us how you thought about this episode, and if we need to do a second one. For the last question, do you have any message regarding the AI community, or anyone out there? Do you have a message? It can be a personal message, it can be an AI related, business related.
Mhm.
Do you have something to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I think the message is to constantly reinvent yourself, right? To make sure that you're, looking at your capabilities and your skills and thinking, well, what else do I need to do? What else do I need to understand? What else do I need to know? And not being afraid to build new skills, to build new capabilities, to build new knowledge. Many times people are like, "Ooh, that's beyond me," or that's something I don't know, or I've never done that. And you've never done what you've never done, right? I like to say, when I started this business, I really didn't have any knowledge of the industry or contacts or network. It was really truly bootstrapped from nothing, right? I did not have those contacts, so I had to invent everything. And when people say, "Oh, we've never done that," or "Oh, we can't do that," you can't. Don't think that way. Always think what's possible. Always think about how you can move things forward. And really, certainly there are limitations. Certainly, I'm not going to become a machine learning engineer at this point in my career, but I don't want to and I don't need to. But the point is that look at your skills, look at your opportunities, think about where you want to fit in, and be very clear about your purpose and your goals. Right? What are you trying to accomplish? And then staying focused on the things that are most important to you. I listened to a great presentation last night by a Buddhist monk who was talking about focus and concentration. And you put energy where you focus. And so focus yourself, focus your awareness on the things that are important to you and the goals that you have, and be careful about getting distracted from things that are not important or that not aligned with those goals. And those goals, it doesn't mean work all the time. It could, family goals are very important, right? Personal goals are very important. Personal, it's not all about work, right? In fact, you're not going to get to the end of your life and think, "Whoa, geez, I should have worked more," right? You're gonna, so trying to keep your mind open to what's possible in the future. Looking at ways of reinventing yourself, and building new skills, trying new things, not being afraid to fail, and trying to find an environment where failure is acknowledged as part of the learning process. Right? You don't want to be in an organization that punishes failure. That you want to be in an organization that recognizes that failure is part of growth. Failure is part of learning. Failure is part of building skills and capabilities and knowledge and expertise. And that it's important to understand that. We like to say there's no there's learn or grow, there's no fail, right? It's learn or I'm sorry, it's win or learn. It's not, there's no fail, right? There's win or learn. So you either win or you learn. It's not a matter of failure. So try to find an environment that in which that is encouraged. And don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to make those efforts. And there's a lot of possibilities out there for organizations or for individuals. And the future is very bright in many areas. So obviously we have lots of systemic challenges in the world, but I think that many of the things that we're doing with technology can mitigate those things and can help be parts of the solutions. So that would be my message for folks.
Thanks a lot, Seth Earley. I wish you a wonderful day.
You too. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks.